The old Greyhound bus wheezed to a stop at the dusty station, its brakes hissing like a tired animal. Through the grimy window, Maria could see nothing but empty parking lots and low buildings baking under the Texas sun. She had been traveling for 3 days straight, and her body still ached from giving birth just a week ago. Isabella stirred in her arms, making soft baby sounds that tugged at Maria's heart. The tiny girl was wrapped in a hospital blanket that one of the nurses had given them when they left. It was the only thing they owned besides the clothes on their backs. "Last stop, Riverside," the bus driver called out. His voice was tired and scratchy. Most of the other passengers had gotten off hours ago in bigger cities. Now it was just Maria, an elderly man with a cane, and a woman with 2 shopping bags full of what looked like her entire life. Maria stood up slowly, her legs shaky from sitting so long. Every movement reminded her that her body was still healing. The hospital had only kept her for 2 days after Isabella was born. They said she was healthy enough to leave, but Maria knew the real reason. She had no insurance, no money, and no family to help pay the bills. The immigration officers had been waiting for her when she tried to register Isabella's birth. They were polite but firm. She could stay in the country while her case was being reviewed, they said, but she would need to find her own place to live and her own way to survive. They handed her some papers in English that she couldn't read and a bus ticket to Riverside, where there was supposedly a community center that helped people like her. Stepping off the bus felt like walking into an oven. The heat hit her face like a slap, and Isabella began to cry. Maria bounced her gently, making the soft shushing sounds that seemed to calm her daughter. Around them, the small bus station was mostly empty except for a few people sitting on plastic chairs, waiting for buses that might not come for hours. Maria looked around, trying to figure out where to go next. The papers in her pocket had an address for the community center, but she had no idea how to get there. She didn't even know if it was walking distance. Her feet were already swollen and sore from the long trip. "You need help, honey?" The voice belonged to the woman from the bus, the one with the shopping bags. She was probably in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "I looking for ... Maria struggled with the English words. "Community center for help?" The woman nodded and pointed down the street. "About 6 blocks that way. You walking?" Maria nodded. She had no choice. In this heat, with a baby? The woman shook her head. "I'm Rita, by the way, Rita Gonzalez. I live here in town." "Maria," she replied, shifting Isabella to her other arm. "This is Isabella." Rita looked at the baby and her expression softened even more. "How old is she?" "1 week," Maria said, her English careful and slow. "1 week?" Rita's eyes widened. "Honey, what are you doing traveling with a week-old baby?" The question was asked with such genuine concern that Maria felt tears starting to form. She had been trying to stay strong, to not think about how scared and alone she felt. But Rita's kindness broke through her defenses. "I have no place," Maria said simply. "Hospital say I must go. Immigration give me bus ticket to here." Rita set down her shopping bags and really looked at Maria for the first time. She saw a girl who couldn't be more than 19, wearing clothes that were too big for her post-pregnancy body. She saw dark circles under her eyes from exhaustion and worry. Most of all, she saw someone who was trying desperately to hold everything together for her baby. "The community center closed down last month," Rita said gently. "Budget cuts." Maria's face went pale. If the community center was closed, she had nowhere to go, no backup plan, no safety net. "But don't you worry," Rita continued quickly, seeing the panic in Maria's eyes. "There are other places that help. Good people in this town. Let me give you a ride and we'll figure something out." Rita's truck was old and the air conditioning barely worked, but it was better than walking in the heat. As they drove through Riverside, Maria looked out the window at the small town. It wasn't much to look at, a few blocks of Main Street, with a grocery store, a diner, a gas station, and several empty storefronts. Beyond that were residential streets with small houses and big yards, and beyond that she could see open land stretching to the horizon. "Not much here," Rita said, following her gaze. Most young people leave for the cities, but it's a good place to raise kids. Safe, people look out for each other. They stopped first at a church, but the pastor wasn't in. Then they tried the local food bank, but it was only open 2 days a week. Rita made several phone calls, speaking rapid Spanish to people who might know someone who might be able to help. Isabella had fallen asleep in Maria's arms, her tiny fist curled against her mother's chest. Every now and then she would make little, sucking motions with her mouth, dreaming of feeding. Maria needed to nurse her soon, but she felt embarrassed asking Rita to stop somewhere. "She's beautiful," Rita said, glancing at the baby. "Looks just like you." "She is good baby," Maria said, not cry much. Even on bus, she was quiet. Smart girl. She knows her mama is taking good care of her. But Maria didn't feel like she was. Taking good care of Isabella? How could she, when she didn't even know where they would sleep tonight? As if reading her thoughts, Rita pulled into the parking lot of a small motel. "The owner here, Carlos, he's a good man. Let me talk to him." The conversation at the motel desk was in Spanish, too fast for Maria to follow completely, but she caught enough to understand. Rita was asking if Carlos could give them a room for a few days while they figured out a more permanent solution. Carlos kept shaking his head and pointing to a sign that said, "Payment in advance." Finally, Rita pulled out her own wallet. "No," Maria said quickly, "I cannot take your money." "It's not taking," Rita said firmly. "It's accepting help when you need it. You have a baby to think about, but I don't know you. Why you help me?" Rita was quiet for a moment, looking at Isabella sleeping peacefully in Maria's arms. 20 years ago, I was in a situation something like yours. Different circumstances, but I was alone with a baby and scared out of my mind. A stranger helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to help someone else." The motel room was small and simple, but it had a bed, a bathroom, and most importantly, air conditioning. Carlos had even brought them some bottles of water and a few snacks from the vending machine. "You rest," Rita said. "Tomorrow we'll start making some real plans. There are people in this town who can help, I promise." After Rita left, Maria sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not the scared, panicked tears she had been holding back, but tears of relief. For the first time since leaving the hospital, she and Isabella were safe. They had a roof over their heads and a chance to figure out what came next. Isabella woke up hungry, and Maria fed her while looking out the window at the small town that might become their home. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, that was enough. 3 days later, Maria was starting to panic again. Rita had been true to her word, introducing her to several people in town who wanted to help. The problem was that good intentions didn't pay for motel rooms or baby formula. Father Miguel at St. Catherine's Church had given her some donated baby clothes and diapers. The lady at the grocery store, Mrs. Chun, had let her buy milk and bread with food stamps she helped Maria apply for. But the food stamps wouldn't come through for another week. And Maria's money was almost gone. She sat in the motel room, bouncing Isabella gently while trying to make sense of a newspaper someone had given her. The job listings were all in English, and most required things she didn't have: a permanent address, references, reliable transportation. The few jobs she might be able to do, like cleaning houses or washing dishes, didn't pay enough to cover childcare plus rent. A knock at the door interrupted her worried thoughts. When she opened it, she found 2 men in clean work shirts and baseball caps. They were both Hispanic, probably in their 30s, with friendly smiles and business cards. "Maria Santos?" The taller one asked in Spanish. "I'm Luis Morales, and this is my partner, Diego Ruiz. We heard you might be looking for work." Maria invited them in, grateful to speak in her native language for once. Luis did most of the talking while Diego looked around the small room, his eyes taking in the baby. Supplies scattered on the dresser and the suitcase that held everything they owned. "We run an employment service," Luis explained, settling into the room's single chair. "We help people like you find good jobs with nice families. Room, board, steady work, everything you need to get back on your feet." It sounded too good to be true, which should have been Maria's first warning. But she was 19 years old, exhausted, and desperate. When someone offers you exactly what you need most, it's hard to ask too many questions. What kind of work? She asked, shifting Isabella to her other arm. Household help mostly, Diego said, speaking for the first time. His English was better than Luce's, she noticed. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of children. Good families who understand that you have a baby. They provide a place to live, food, everything. How much money? Maria asked. Luis and Diego exchanged a look. Well, that's where it gets a little complicated, Luis said. See, these families, they're taking a big risk hiring someone without papers, without references, so they need some guarantees. He pulled out a folder and spread some papers on the small table. Maria couldn't read most of it, but she could see numbers. Big numbers. This covers your transportation costs, housing deposit, background checks, legal fees for your work permit, Luis explained, pointing to different lines. It comes to about $8,000. Maria's heart sank. I don't have $8,000. I don't have $8. That's okay, Diego said quickly. That's why we're here. The families understand your situation. They'll cover all these costs up front and you work it off? Fair wages minus room and board and paying back what they advanced you. How long? Maria asked. Depends how hard you work, Luis said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Could be 2 years, could be 3. But think about it, guaranteed job, safe place to live, people who understand about your baby. And at the end, you'll have experience, references, money saved up, you'll be set. Isabella started fussing, and Maria automatically began the gentle, swaying motion that usually calmed her. But her mind was racing. 2 or 3 years of work to pay back $8,000? That meant they would basically own her. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, Luis said, standing up. But don't think too long. We have other people interested in these positions, and the good families get picked fast. After they left, Maria tried to do the math. If she made minimum wage, which was about $7 an hour, and worked 40 hours a week, that was about $1,200 a month before taxes. If they took out money for room and board and paying back the $8,000, how much would she actually see? She called Rita, whose number was written on a scrap of paper by the phone. Rita, is Maria? Can you come talk to me? Some men came about job? Rita arrived 20 minutes later with a bag of groceries and a worried expression. When Maria described the visit from Luis and Diego, Rita's face got darker and darker. Maria, honey, that's not a job. That's debt slavery. But they say good families, safe place for Isabella. Listen to me, Rita said, sitting down beside her on the bed. I've lived in this area my whole life. I know about these companies. They prey on people exactly like you, desperate, alone, with no other options. But what other options do I have? Maria's voice cracked. I have 3 days left in this room. After that, nothing. Rita was quiet for a long moment. There are other ways. It might take longer, it might be harder, but there are other ways. Like what? Well, Mrs. Patterson at the dry cleaner is getting older. She might need help. Part-time. And the Hendersons have that big ranch. They sometimes hire seasonal workers. Even if you had to start with just a few hours a week, it would be honest work for honest pay. But who watch Isabella while I work? There are options for that. 2. The church has an informal childcare group, mothers who watch each other's kids. And Rita paused, looking a little embarrassed. My sister Carmen just moved back to town. She's been looking for ways to make a little extra money. She loves babies. Maria wanted to believe her, but the fear was so strong. What if I try those things and they don't work? What if I end up with nothing? Then we'll figure something else out, Rita said firmly. But Maria, if you sign with those men, you won't just have nothing, you'll be trapped. And what happens to Isabella if you're working 16 hours a day for people who see you as property instead of a person? That night, Maria barely slept. Isabella seemed to sense her stress and was fussier than usual, waking up every few hours. Each time Maria fed her, she looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and tried to imagine their future. In one future, she signed the papers Luis had left with her. She and Isabella would have a roof over their heads immediately. But Maria would be working for people who could control every aspect of her life. Who could threaten to call immigration if she complained? Who could keep her isolated from people? Like Rita, who might help her understand her rights. In the other future, she took Rita's harder path. She might have to sleep in her car or a shelter for a while. She might have to take several small jobs instead of one big one. But she would be free to make her own choices, to leave if things got bad, to build something real for herself and Isabella. By morning, her decision was made. When Lise called that afternoon, Maria was ready. "Thank you for the offer," she said, in Spanish, "but I've decided to look for other work." There was a long pause. "Maria, I don't think you understand how hard it's going to be out there on your own. These families I told you about, they're good people. They'll take care of you." "I understand," Maria said, "but I need to take care of myself." "If you change your mind," Luis said, and his voice was cooler now, "call us. But these opportunities don't wait around forever." After she hung up, Maria called Rita. "I'm ready to try the hard way," she said. 2 weeks later, Maria was back to having no options at all. The part-time job at the dry cleaner had lasted exactly 4 days before Mrs. Patterson decided that having a baby around, even a quiet one like Isabella, was too much of a distraction. The seasonal work at the Henderson Ranch wouldn't start for another month, and Maria couldn't wait that long. She had already moved out of the motel and was staying in Rita's spare room, but even Rita's kindness had limits. Rita's husband was getting frustrated about the extra mouths to feed and the constant sound of a crying baby. He wasn't mean about it, but Maria could see the stress it was causing between them. "I can't keep taking advantage of your family," Maria told Rita one morning over coffee. Isabella was sleeping in a borrowed bassinet, and for once the house was quiet. "You're not taking advantage?" Rita insisted, but Maria could hear the tiredness in her voice. That's when Luis called again. "I heard things didn't work out with the regular jobs," he said when Maria answered her phone. He didn't sound surprised. "Look, I've got a new opportunity. Different from what we talked about before. I told you I wasn't interested. Just hear me out. There's an event tomorrow where several employers will be looking for workers. Good employers, established businesses. You can meet them face to face. Hear what they're offering. Make your own choice. No pressure." Maria hesitated. "What kind of event?" "Think of it like a job fair. People looking for work get to meet people who need workers. Everything open and honest. If you don't like what you see, you walk away, but at least you'll know what's available." The address Louise gave her was for a warehouse on the outskirts of town, past the main business district and the residential neighborhoods. When Maria arrived the next morning with Isabella in her arms, she immediately felt like something was wrong. The warehouse was big and mostly empty, with concrete floors and metal walls that made every sound echo. Folding chairs were set up in rows, and maybe 50 people were sitting or standing around, all of them Hispanic, all of them looking as desperate as Maria felt. But the men walking around between the chairs didn't look like employers at a normal job fair. They looked like buyers at a cattle auction. Maria almost turned around and left right then, but Isabella started crying and several people turned to look at them. Louise appeared at her elbow before she could make up her mind. "Maria, I'm so glad you came. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." He guided her to an empty chair near the front of the room. Around her, Maria could hear bits of conversations in Spanish. People talking about debts they owed, family members back home. Who needed money? Children who were sick and needed medical care? Everyone had a story, and all the stories were about desperation. At exactly 10 o'clock, a man in an expensive-looking suit stepped up to a small platform at the front of the room. He had papers in his hand and a microphone that squealed with feedback when he turned it on. "Good morning, everyone," he said in English, then repeated it in Spanish. "Welcome to our monthly employment opportunity event. We have several excellent positions available today with some of the area's most respected families and businesses." Maria's stomach started to sink as she realized what kind of employment opportunity this really was. The man with the microphone began calling out names and descriptions like he was reading from a catalog. Rosa Delgado, age 24, experienced with childcare and house cleaning, available immediately. Starting debt obligation $8,500. A young woman near the back of the room stood up, her face bright red with embarrassment. Several men in the audience looked her up and down, some making notes on clipboards. Any questions about Rosa's availability or terms? The announcer asked. One of the men raised his hand. Does she speak English? Basic conversational level. She's enrolled in our English improvement program. What about legal status? Work authorization pending? Part of the service package we provide. Maria felt sick. They weren't talking about Rosa like she was a person looking for a job. They were talking about her like she was a product being sold. Bidding for Rosa's contract starts at standard rate, the announcer continued. Do I hear any offers? The bidding that followed was conducted in a mixture of English and Spanish, with Luis and Diego and several other men like them facilitating between the workers and the potential employers. It became clear that what was being auctioned off wasn't just jobs, but complete control over people's lives. Maria watched in horror as Rosa was purchased by a man who owned several fast food restaurants. The terms were clear. Rosa would work in his restaurants for 3 years, living in housing he provided, eating food he provided, and gradually paying off her debt, which somehow kept growing every month. More names were called. More people stood up to be evaluated and bid on. Maria noticed that all the workers looked exhausted and scared, while all the buyers looked confident and businesslike. This wasn't a job fair. This was a human trafficking operation disguised as an employment service. Maria Santos, the announcer called out. Maria's blood went cold. She hadn't put her name on any list. She looked around wildly for an exit, but Luis was suddenly beside her chair, his hand on her shoulder. Go ahead, he said quietly. Just let them see what you bring to the table. I don't want to do this, Maria whispered. It's too late for that, Diego said, appearing on her other side. You owe us for the transportation here, the processing fees, the time we've invested in your case. Stand up. Maria stood up slowly, Isabella crying in her arms. She felt like everyone in the warehouse was staring at her, judging her, calculating her worth. Maria Santos, age 19, new mother willing to work, the announcer read from his papers. A baby complicates scheduling, but candidate is motivated to. Work hard. Starting debt obligation includes childcare support, $12,000. $12,000, Maria's head spun. When had the amount gotten so high? Does the baby come with the package? One of the potential employers called out. Baby stays with mother, the announcer replied. Employer provides suitable childcare. Arrangements as part of housing. What kind of work can she do with a nursing infant? She's young and strong. House cleaning, cooking, basic farm work. Baby won't interfere with productivity. They were talking about Isabella like she was a piece of luggage that might or might not be convenient to carry around. Maria clutched her daughter tighter. Fighting back tears of anger and humiliation, the bidding started, and Maria listened in growing panic as her future was decided by strangers. A woman who owned a cleaning service bid first. Then a man who said he needed help at his ranch. Then another man who didn't specify what kind of work he had in mind, which made Maria's skin crawl. Do I hear any other bids? The announcer asked. That's when a new voice spoke up from the back of the room. This is disgusting. Everyone turned to look. A tall man in worn jeans and a work shirt was standing near the door, his face dark with anger. He looked to be in his 60s, with gray hair under a baseball cap, and the kind of deep tan that came from working outside. Excuse me? The announcer said. I said this is disgusting, the man repeated, walking toward the front of the room. You're auctioning off human beings like they're livestock. Luis stepped forward. Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private employment event. If you're not here for our services... Oh, I'm here for your services, the man said. His voice was quiet but carried clearly through the warehouse. I'm here to shut this whole thing down. The announcer looked nervous. Security? But before anyone could move, the man pulled out his phone and held it up. I've been recording this whole thing. Pretty sure the FBI is going to be very interested. In your employment services, chaos erupted in the warehouse. Some of the workers started moving toward the exits. Some of the buyers were shouting at Lise and his partners. And Maria, still standing at the front of the room with Isabella crying in her arms, found herself face to face with the angry stranger who had just disrupted her auction. "You okay?" he asked her quietly. Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good," he said, "because we're getting you out of here." The man's name was Tom Mackenzie, and he owned one of the largest cattle ranches in the county. Maria learned this as they sat in his pickup truck outside the warehouse, waiting for the police to arrive. She also learned that he was 62 years old, had been ranching his whole life, and was madder than she had ever seen anyone get. 27 years I've been hearing rumors about this kind of thing, Tom said, watching through the windshield as people scattered from the warehouse. 27 years of other ranchers telling me I was naive for paying fair wages and following labor laws. Today I finally saw what they meant. Maria sat in the passenger seat, bouncing Isabella gently and trying to process what had just happened. One minute she was being auctioned off like a piece of property, and the next minute this stranger was loading her into his truck and promising to help her. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why you help me?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, watching Louise argue with someone on his cell phone. "My grandmother came to this country when she was about your age," he said finally. "Different circumstances, but she was alone and scared and desperate. Someone helped her when she needed it most. She used to tell me that kindness was like water. In the desert, it should flow freely to anyone who needs it." "But you don't know me," Maria said. "I could be—" "Bad person?" Tom looked at her, really looked at her. He saw a teenage girl holding a baby and trying not to cry after being humiliated in front of strangers. He saw someone who was clean and well-groomed despite obviously having very little. He saw the way she held her daughter, protective and gentle at the same time. "I know enough," he said simply. The police arrived 15 minutes later, 2 county sheriff's deputies who clearly knew Tom well. Maria watched nervously as Tom got out to talk to them, afraid that she might be in trouble too. But Tom seemed to be explaining the situation, gesturing toward the warehouse and showing them something on his phone. One of the deputies came over to the truck. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Martinez. Mr. Mackenzie says you were brought here under false pretenses." Maria nodded, not trusting her English to explain the complicated situation. "We're going to need to get a statement from you," Deputy Martinez continued. "But Mr. Mackenzie has offered to provide transportation and translation help. Is that okay with you?" Again, Maria nodded. She didn't have much choice, but something about Tom Mackenzie made her feel safer than she had felt in weeks. The next few hours were a blur of police stations, paperwork, and phone calls. Maria gave her statement with Tom translating the parts she couldn't manage in English. She learned that what she had witnessed wasn't just morally wrong, it was completely illegal. Human trafficking, labor exploitation, document fraud. The FBI was already involved, and the warehouse operation was being shut down. "What happens to me now?" Maria asked Deputy Martinez as they finished up the paperwork. "Well, you're not in any trouble," he assured her. "You're actually going to be eligible for special protection as a witness in a trafficking case. That could help with your immigration status." Maria didn't fully understand what that meant, but it sounded hopeful. "Where will you go tonight?" Deputy Martinez asked. Maria looked at Tom, who had been waiting patiently through the whole process. She didn't want to presume anything, but she literally had nowhere else to go. "My truck's got room," Tom said quietly. The drive to Tom's ranch took about 20 minutes, winding through rolling hills dotted with cattle and oil pumps. Maria had never been this far outside of town before, and she was amazed by how big and empty everything looked. Back home in El Salvador, there were people everywhere, houses crowded together, noise and activity all the time. Here, you could go for miles without seeing another human being. "It's beautiful," she said as they turned onto a dirt road marked with a simple wooden sign, Mackenzie Ranch Est, 1952. "My grandfather started this place with 12 head of cattle and a lot of hope," Tom said. "Built it up slow and steady. My dad expanded it, and I've been trying to take care of it ever since." The ranch house was bigger than Maria had expected, but not fancy. It was a long, low building with a wide front porch and several outbuildings scattered around it. Everything looked well-maintained but lived in, like a place where people actually worked and lived rather than just tried to impress visitors. Tom parked near the front porch and sat for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "Look," he said. "Finally, I'm not real good at this kind of thing. I live alone, I work alone, and I don't have much experience with babies or young mothers or complicated situations. But I do have a guest house that's not being used, and I do need help around here from time to time." Maria waited, not sure what he was offering. "What I'm saying is, if you want to stay here while you figure out your next steps, you're welcome. No strings attached, no debt to work off, no contracts or complications. Just a safe place to live with your daughter until you're ready to move on." "Why?" Maria asked again. It was the question that kept coming up because in her experience, people didn't help strangers without wanting something in return. "Because it's the right thing to do," Tom said simply. "And because that little girl deserves a chance to grow up safe and free." The guest house was small but perfect, a living room, bedroom, tiny kitchen, and bathroom all in about 600 square feet. It had been built for Tom's mother when she got older, he explained, but she had passed away 2 years ago and it had been empty ever since. "There's not much in the way of furniture," Tom said, opening windows to let in the evening breeze. "But there's a bed and a couch, and the appliances all work." Maria walked around the small space with Isabella in her arms. After weeks of motel rooms and sleeping on Rita's couch, having her own place again, even temporarily, felt like a miracle. "The main house is about 100 yards that way," Tom continued, pointing through the window. "If you need anything, just holler. And, there's an intercom system. Button by the front door connects to the kitchen in the main house." "What do you want me to do?" Maria asked. "For work, I mean." Tom scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. "Well, I suppose we could figure something out if you want to earn a little money. The house could use a good cleaning, and I'm not much of a cook, but honestly, you just had a baby 2 weeks ago. You should probably focus on taking care of yourself and her for a while." That night, after Tom had brought over some basic groceries and baby supplies, Maria sat in her own living room and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been desperate enough to let strangers auction her off. Tonight, she was sitting in a comfortable house with her daughter, safe and free, thanks to a man who wanted nothing in return. It was almost too good to be true, which worried her. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were, but Isabella was sleeping peacefully in the bedroom, and for the first time in weeks, Maria wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found someone who really was just trying to help. Maria barely slept that first night at the ranch. Every sound made her jump. The wind in the trees, cattle lowing in the distance, the old house settling on its foundation. She kept expecting someone to knock on the door and tell her there had been a mistake, that she needed to leave, but when morning came, nothing bad happened. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window where Isabella was sleeping in a borrowed crib that Tom had somehow found and set up while Maria was giving her statement to the police. The baby looked so peaceful, her tiny hands curled into fists, her dark eyelashes resting against her cheeks. A soft knock at the front door made Maria's heart race, but when she opened it, she found only a thermos of coffee and a plate of breakfast burritos sitting on the porch. A note in careful handwriting said, "Thought you might be hungry. No rush on anything today." Tom, the food was simple but delicious: eggs, bacon, cheese, and peppers wrapped in homemade tortillas. Maria ate sitting on the front porch, watching the sunrise over the rolling hills and trying to remember the last time she had felt this peaceful. Around 10 o'clock, Tom appeared, walking across the yard from the direction of the barn. He was wearing work clothes and boots that had seen a lot of use, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his environment. "Morning," he called out as he approached the porch. "Hope you got some rest." "Yes, thank you," Maria replied, "and thank you for breakfast. Was very good." "Rosa's recipe," Tom said, settling into one of the porch chairs. "She's my housekeeper. Has been for about 15 years. She comes in 3 days a week to keep me from living. Like a complete bachelor. Rosa? Maria's face brightened. It was nice to know there was another woman around, even part-time. You'll meet her Thursday. She's looking forward to having another Spanish speaker to talk to. Gets tired of my terrible pronunciation. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a group of cattle graze in a nearby pasture. Isabella had woken up and was making soft baby sounds from inside the house. Can I ask you something? Maria said finally. Sure. Yesterday, at the warehouse, how did you know to be there? Tom's face darkened. I've been hearing rumors about that operation for months. Other ranchers talking about how easy it was to get workers who couldn't complain about conditions or wages. Made my stomach turn, but I didn't have any proof. So you went to see for yourself? I went to get evidence. Figured if I could document what was really happening, I could get the authorities involved. Tom shook his head. I didn't expect to see anything as blatant as an actual auction. That was worse than anything I had imagined. And you decided to help me because... Tom was quiet for a long moment, looking out at his cattle. You want the honest answer? Maria nodded. I saw you standing up there holding your baby, and I saw the way those men were talking about you, like you were property. Like your daughter was just an inconvenience that came along with the package. His voice got harder. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the way workers were treated on some of the big ranches when she was young. I swore I would never be part of anything like that. But taking me in, giving me place to live, that's more than just not being part of bad system. Maybe, Tom said. But maybe not. See, I think there are two kinds of people in this world. People who see someone in trouble and think, not my problem, and people who see someone in trouble and think, what can I do to help? I was raised to be the second kind. Isabella's soft sounds were getting more insistent, and Maria excused herself to go feed her daughter. When she came back to the porch 20 minutes later, Tom was still sitting there, but now he had a laptop computer balanced on his knees. I've been doing some research, he said without looking up, about your legal situation. Turns out that witness protection thing Deputy Martinez mentioned is a real program. It's called a TVISA, designed for victims of human trafficking. Maria sat down beside him, curious despite herself. If you qualify, it gives you legal status to stay in the country for up to 4 years. You can work legally, and after 3 years you can apply for permanent residency. Tom looked up from the computer. Want me to help you contact a lawyer who specializes in this stuff? That costs money I don't have, Maria said automatically. There are organizations that provide free legal help for trafficking victims. I found 3 of them within driving distance. Maria stared at him. You did all this research ... for me? Took about an hour, Tom said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Figure if you're going to be my neighbor for a while, might as well make sure you're here legally. That afternoon, Tom drove Maria and Isabella into town to meet with a lawyer named Patricia Valdez, who worked for an immigrant rights organization. Patricia was a small, energetic woman in her 40s who spoke fluent Spanish and seemed to know exactly what questions to ask about Maria's experience at the warehouse. This is definitely a trafficking case, Patricia said after Maria had told her story. You were deceived about the nature of the work. You were going to be forced to work under conditions of debt bondage, and you would have had your freedom of movement restricted. That's textbook human trafficking under federal law. What does that mean for me? Maria asked. It means you're eligible for protection under the TVISA program. It will take some time to process the application, but in the meantime, you can get work authorization and you don't have to worry about being deported. For the first time since arriving in the United States, Maria felt like she might actually have a future here that evening. She and Tom sat on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isabella was sleeping. In Maria's arms, content after a day of new experiences? Can I ask you something now? Tom said. Of course. What do you want to do? I mean, long term. When all this legal stuff gets sorted out and you have your feet under you again. Maria had been thinking about that question all day. I want to learn, she said finally, English better. Maybe how to do job that uses my brain, not just my hands. I want Isabella to grow up knowing that her mother is more than just someone who cleans houses or works in fields. What did you do back home before you came here? I was in school, studying to be teacher, but then ... Maria gestured to Isabella. Everything changed. Teaching's a good profession, Tom said. A lot of kids around here could use good teachers who understand what it's like to struggle. Maybe someday, Maria said. First I need to learn to survive here. Learn the language, learn how things work. Well, Tom said, settling back in his chair, looks like we've got time to figure it out. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Maria realized that for the first time since leaving El Salvador, she was actually looking forward to tomorrow. 3 weeks later, Maria's life had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Every morning, Tom would leave a thermos of coffee and something for breakfast on her porch. Every evening, they would sit together and talk about their days. In between, Maria took care of Isabella, practiced her English with books Tom had brought her from the library, and gradually began to help around the ranch. It started small. Tom mentioned that the main house was getting dusty, so Maria offered to clean it while he was out checking on the cattle. When she finished, she found Tom standing in his spotless kitchen with the expression of amazement on his face. I forgot what this place looked like clean, he said, running his finger along the counter. Rosa does her best, but 3 days a week isn't enough to keep up with all the dust out here? I can do more, Maria offered. I like to work, makes me feel useful. You don't owe me anything, Tom reminded her. This isn't payment for letting you stay here. I know, but I want to help. You are helping me, so I help you. So Maria began cleaning the main house twice a week. Then she started doing Tom's laundry, because she noticed he was wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row. Then she began cooking dinner occasionally, because the man seemed to live entirely on sandwiches and canned soup. You don't have to do all this, Tom said one evening as they shared a meal of chicken and rice that Maria had prepared. I want to, Maria said simply. In my country, when someone helps your family, you help them back, is normal. Tom nodded. Slowly, that's fair, I suppose. But Maria, I want you to know something. This isn't charity. You're earning your keep and then some. If you were working for anyone else, you'd be getting paid good money for this kind of work. That gave Maria an idea. Maybe you could pay me small amount? Not for staying here, but for the work I do? Tom looked surprised. You want me to pay you? I want to learn how to make money in America. Legal money? Honest money? If I work for you and you pay me, then I learn how system works, yes? That's actually a really good idea, Tom said. We'll figure out fair wages for the work you're doing, and I'll pay you like any other employee. That way you'll have some money of your own and you'll get experience with how legal employment works here. The next week, Tom set up Maria with her first American paycheck. It wasn't much, minimum wage for about 15 hours of work, but seeing her name on that check made Maria feel prouder than she had felt since leaving El Salvador. Rosa, Tom's regular housekeeper, turned out to be a treasure. She was a woman in her 50s who had immigrated from Mexico 20 years earlier and was full of practical advice about living in Texas as a Spanish-speaking woman. The key, Rosa told Maria one Thursday afternoon as they folded laundry together while Isabella slept, is to learn English fast, but don't forget Spanish. Your daughter needs to know both languages. Makes her stronger. Tom says I should take classes, Maria said. But how do I go to school with Isabella? Community college has childcare, Rosa said. And Tom, he would help you figure it out. That man has a soft spot for people trying to improve themselves. Why he never married? Maria asked. He is good man, has nice ranch, seems lonely sometimes. Rosa smiled knowingly. He was engaged once, long time ago. Girl from town, but she wanted him to sell the ranch, move to the city. He couldn't do it. This land is his life. And he never found someone else. I think he decided the ranch was enough family for him. But lately ... Rosa gave Maria a meaningful look. He seems happier. More like the Tom I knew when I first started working here. As the weeks passed, Maria began to understand the rhythm of ranch life. She learned when Tom got up, 5 a.m., when he came in for lunch, rarely, and when he finished work for the day, whenever the work was done, which could be anywhere from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. She learned that cattle could get sick, that fences needed constant repair, and that the weather was the most important thing in Tom's life after the animals. "Want to see something?" Tom asked one afternoon as Maria was hanging laundry on the line behind the guest house. Isabella was in a bouncy seat nearby, gurgling happily at the clothes flapping in the breeze. Tom led them to the barn, where Maria was surprised to find not just cattle equipment, but also 3 horses and stalls along. "One wall thought you raised cows," Maria said. "I do, but a rancher needs horses to work cattle. These 3 are my partners." Tom led her to the first stall, where a large brown horse was eating hay. "This is Bruno. He's the steady one. Been with me for 12 years? The horse looked up at them with gentle brown eyes, and Isabella made an excited noise from her carrier. "Can, I touch him?" Maria asked. "Sure, just hold your hand flat and let him smell you first." Maria had never been this close to a horse before. Bruno's nose was softer than she had expected, and when he huffed against her palm, she couldn't help but smile. "He likes you," Tom observed. "Bruno's a good judge of character." Over the next few weeks, Tom began teaching Maria about the horses. How to brush them, how to feed them, how to read their moods and body language. Maria discovered she had a natural instinct for it. "You're not afraid of them," Tom said one afternoon as Maria carefully brushed Bruno's neck. "A lot of people are, intimidated by something that big." "They are beautiful," Maria said simply, "and they are gentle if you are gentle with them." "Exactly, horses respond to how you treat them. Show them respect and patience, and they'll do anything for you. Try to force them or scare them, and they'll fight you every step of the way." Maria thought about that as she worked. It seemed like good advice for more than just horses. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tom made an announcement. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've been here almost 2 months now, and you're doing good work, real good work. I'd like to make this more official." Maria's heart jumped. Was he going to ask her to leave? "What I mean is," Tom continued, "I'd like to offer you a real job. Full-time employment with benefits, legal, everything. You could stay in the guest house as long as you want, but you'd be here as my employee, not as someone I'm helping out." "What kind of job?" Maria asked carefully. "Ranch hand, house manager, whatever you want to call it. You're already doing most of the work. Might as well make it official and pay you properly for it." Maria looked down at Isabella, who was sleeping peacefully in her lap. The idea of having a real job, a real income, a real place in this community was almost overwhelming. "I would like that," she said finally, "very much." "Good," Tom said, and Maria could hear the smile in his voice. "Because I was hoping you'd say yes, this place runs a lot better with you here." That night, Maria called Rita to share the good news. Rita was thrilled, but not entirely surprised. "I told you there were good people in this town," Rita said. "And Tom Mackenzie is one of the best." "You landed in the right place, Maria." "I think maybe I did," Maria agreed, looking around the little house that was starting to feel like home. News travels fast in small towns, and Riverside was no exception. Within a few weeks of Maria starting her official job at the Mackenzie Ranch, everyone seemed to know the story, or at least their version of it. The young Mexican girl with the baby who Tom Mackenzie had rescued from human traffickers. The illegal immigrant who was now living rent-free and getting paid American wages for housework. The reactions were as varied as the people telling the story at the diner on Main Street. Maria could feel eyes following her when she came in with Tom to pick up lunch orders. Some of the looks were curious but friendly, people who had heard she was a hard worker and that Tom seemed happier these days, but others were harder to read, and a few were openly hostile. "Don't pay attention to them," Tom told her one afternoon, as they left the diner and Maria was obviously uncomfortable. "Some people in this town have never been more than 50 miles from where they were born. They're afraid of change, afraid of anything different? Maybe I should not come to town? With you, Maria suggested. I don't want to make trouble for you. You're not making trouble for me, Tom said firmly. Anyone who has a problem with me treating my employees fairly can take it up with me directly. But the tension was real, and it was affecting more than just Maria. Rita called one evening to tell her that people were taking sides. Mrs. Chan at the grocery store says you're the hardest worker she's ever seen, and Tom is lucky to have you, Rita reported. But some of the other ranchers are saying Tom is paying too much and making them look bad. What does that mean? Maria asked. It means some people are worried that if Tom treats his workers well, their workers might start expecting better treatment too. Maria hadn't thought about it that way. She was just grateful to have honest work for honest pay. But apparently, her situation was highlighting how badly some other workers in the area were being treated. The issue came to a head on a Thursday evening when Tom came home from town looking angrier than Maria had ever seen him. What happened? She asked as he slammed his truck door and stalked toward the house. Had a conversation with Bobby Henderson, Tom said, his jaw tight. He wanted to know why I was spoiling the Mexican workers by paying you decent wages and giving you real benefits. Bobby Henderson owned the ranch where Maria had hoped to get seasonal work months ago. She had heard from other workers that his employees lived in a converted barn with no air conditioning and were paid in cash under the table. What did you tell him? Maria asked. I told him that maybe if he treated his workers like human beings, instead of tools, he wouldn't have to worry about them wanting better conditions. That probably didn't make him happy. No, it didn't. He said I was making it harder for all the other ranchers to find cheap labor. Said if I kept this up, pretty soon every immigrant worker would expect to be treated like ... Tom stopped himself, but Maria could see he was struggling with his temper. Like what? She prompted. Like Americans, Tom finished quietly. As if being treated with dignity and respect is something only Americans deserve? That conversation bothered Maria more than she wanted to admit. She began to notice things she had been too grateful to see before. Other workers at the feed store, who wouldn't make eye contact with her. Women at the grocery store who whispered when she walked by. The way some people treated her differently when Tom was with her versus when she was alone. The situation got more complicated when other immigrant workers started showing up at the ranch. The first was a man named Carlos who worked at a construction company in town. He came by one evening after work, hat in hand, to ask if Tom had any other jobs available. I heard you pay fair wages and don't cheat people, Carlos said in Spanish. My boss, he promises one thing and pays another. Always says next week he'll make it right, but next week never comes. Tom listened to Carlos's story through Maria's translation, his face getting darker with each detail. I don't have construction work, Tom told Carlos, but I know some contractors in the county who are honest. Let me make some calls. Within a week, Carlos had a new job with better pay and proper documentation. Word spread, and more workers started coming by, asking for advice or referrals or just information about their rights. You're running an unofficial employment agency? Rosa observed one afternoon as she and Maria watched Tom help a woman fill out paperwork for a complaint against her previous employer. Is that bad? Maria asked. No, Mia, it's necessary. But it's also going to make some people very angry. Rosa was right. The warehouse operation that Tom had exposed was still under federal investigation, but Lise and his partners had been released on bail while they awaited trial. They weren't allowed to run their employment service anymore, but that didn't stop them from being angry about the business they had lost. Maria first noticed the car parked at the end of Tom's driveway on a Tuesday morning. It was there when she got up to feed Isabella, and it was still there when Tom left for the north pasture an hour later. Probably just someone turned around, Tom said when she mentioned it, but the car was back the next day and the day after that. Always the same silver sedan, always parked just off the ranch property where it was technically legal but obviously intended to make a point. It's Luis, Maria told Tom after she got a better look through binoculars. From the warehouse. Tom's Expression went cold. What does he want? I think he wants to scare me. Make me know he's watching. Well, he's about to learn something about what happens when people threaten my employees, Tom said, reaching for his phone. The conversation with the sheriff's department was brief and to the point. Tom explained about the harassment, the federal trafficking case, and his concerns about witness intimidation. Within 2 hours, a deputy was stationed at the ranch entrance, and the silver sedan was gone, but the message had been delivered. Maria was causing problems for people who had money and connections, people who knew how to make trouble. That night, as Maria put Isabella to bed, she found herself wondering if staying at the ranch was putting Tom in danger too. What if Luis and his partners decided to expand their intimidation campaign? What if they targeted Tom's cattle or his property or his other employees? You're thinking too hard, Tom said, when he found her sitting on the porch later, staring out at the dark pastures. I'm thinking about whether I should leave, Maria said quietly. Because of Luis? Because I'm causing problems for you. For everyone, maybe it would be easier if I just went somewhere else. Tom sat down beside her and was quiet for a long moment. You know what my grandfather used to say? He asked finally. What? He used to say that doing the right thing is never easy, but it's always simple. You know what the right thing is? You just have to decide if you're brave enough to do it. What if I'm not brave enough? Maria asked. Then I guess I'll have to be brave enough for both of us, Tom said. Because you're not going anywhere, Maria. This is your home now, and nobody is going to chase you away from it. The confrontation came on a Friday morning in October, almost 6 months after Maria had first arrived at the ranch. She was hanging laundry behind the guest house when she heard trucks pulling into the yard, more trucks than Tom usually had. For ranch business, looking around the corner of the house, Maria saw 3 vehicles, Luis's silver sedan, a white pickup truck she didn't recognize, and a black SUV with tinted windows. 6 men got out, including Luis and Diego from the warehouse operation. Maria's first instinct was to run, but Isabella was napping inside the house and she couldn't leave her daughter. Instead, she pulled out her cell phone and called Tom, who was checking fence lines in the south pasture. They're here, she said when he answered. Luis and 5 other men. They're walking toward the main house. Get in the house and lock the doors, Tom said immediately. I'm calling the sheriff and I'll be there in 10 minutes. But the men weren't heading for the main house. They were walking toward the guest house and they had seen her. Maria Santos, Luis called out in Spanish, we need to talk. Maria backed toward the front door of the house, keeping the phone pressed to her ear. She could hear Tom's truck engine starting in the background of their call. We had a business arrangement, Luis continued, stepping closer. You cost us a lot of money when you walked away from your obligations. Now you're interfering with our other business relationships. I don't owe you anything, Maria said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. You owe us for transportation, processing fees, legal consultations, plus interest and damages for the business disruption you caused. That comes to about $15,000. Diego pulled out some official-looking papers. We're prepared to offer you a payment plan, reasonable terms. Those papers aren't worth anything. A new voice said from behind Luis. Everyone turned to see Patricia Valdez, the immigration lawyer, walking across the yard from where she had parked near the barn. Behind her were 2 people Maria didn't recognize. A man in a suit and a woman with a briefcase. Ms. Santos is under federal protection as a witness in a trafficking case, Patricia continued calmly. Any attempt to coerce payment of fictitious debts constitutes witness intimidation, which is a federal crime. The man in the suit stepped forward. I'm Agent Thompson, FBI. Mr. Morales, Mr. Ruiz, you're both already facing federal charges. I suggest you leave this property immediately before you add witness intimidation to your list of problems. Ruiz looked angry but uncertain. This is a civil matter. She owes us money. No civil court in the country would enforce a contract based on human trafficking, the woman with the briefcase said. I'm Jennifer Walsh, attorney with the Texas Civil Rights Project. Ms. Santos has no legal obligation to pay you anything. Maria watched this confrontation with amazement. She had no idea how all these people had ended up at the ranch at exactly the right time. 10 minutes, Tom's voice said from behind the group. He was walking across the yard with Deputy Martinez and another sheriff's deputy. I called for help 10 minutes ago, and you're all already here. Patricia smiled. We've been expecting this. When you called yesterday to say Louise was back in town, we figured he might try something. Yesterday? Maria looked at Tom in confusion. You knew they were coming? I've been keeping track of their movements since they got out on bail, Tom said. I wasn't going to let them catch us unprepared. Agent Thompson turned to Louise and his companions. Gentlemen, you have 30 seconds to get in your vehicles and leave this property. If I see you anywhere near Miss Santos or Mr. Mackenzie again, I'll arrest you for a violation of your bail conditions. The men didn't argue. Within minutes, their vehicles were heading back down the ranch road, leaving dust clouds in their wake. After they were gone, Maria found herself surrounded by her unexpected support team. Tom and the lawyers and law enforcement officers were talking about next steps and legal strategies, but Maria felt overwhelmed by how many people had come to help her. I don't understand, she said when there was a pause in the conversation. How did you all know to be here? Patricia exchanged a look with Tom. Tom called me yesterday when he heard Louise was back in town. We've been coordinating with the FBI and the Civil Rights Project for weeks, preparing for exactly this situation. You've been planning this? Maria asked Tom. I've been making sure you're protected, Tom corrected. There's a difference. Agent. Thompson pulled out a folder. Miss Santos, we have some good news. The grand jury returned indictments yesterday against the entire trafficking operation. With your testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we expect to get substantial prison sentences for everyone involved. What does that mean for me? It means you're safe, Jennifer Walsh said. And it means your Tavisa application has been approved. You now have legal status to remain in the United States for the next 4 years. Maria felt her knees go weak. After months of uncertainty, she finally had legal permission to be here, to work, to build a life for herself and Isabella. There's more, Patricia added. The ranch where you're working has applied to sponsor you for permanent residency. If you want to stay here long-term, Tom is willing to guarantee your employment. Maria looked at Tom, who was standing quietly beside his truck, letting the lawyers explain everything. You did that? She asked him. I did that, he confirmed. This ranch runs better with you here. I'd like you to stay if you want to. That evening, after all the official people had left and the paperwork was signed and the immediate crisis was over, Maria and Tom sat on the porch as they had so many evenings before. Isabella was playing on a blanket between them, fascinated by her own feat. I have a confession, Tom said as they watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. What kind of confession? When I first brought you here, I thought it would be temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month, until you got back on your feet and found somewhere else to go. Maria smiled. And now? Now I can't imagine this place without you and Isabella. You've made this ranch feel like a home again instead of just a place where I work. We can stay? Maria asked. Really stay? Not just until something better comes. Along? You can stay as long as you want, Tom said. This is your home now. 6 months later, Maria was enrolled in community college classes, studying for her GED and planning to eventually get a teaching degree. Isabella was walking and chattering in both Spanish and English, charming everyone she met. The ranch was more prosperous than it had been in years, with Tom and Maria working as a team to manage both the cattle operation and a growing side business providing job placement services for immigrant workers. The warehouse trafficking operation was shut down permanently, with Luis and his partners serving federal prison sentences. The FBI had used their case as a model for investigating similar operations across the Southwest, rescuing dozens of workers from exploitative conditions. Rita often came by to visit, always marveling at how much Maria's life had changed. You remember that first day you got off the bus? Rita asked one afternoon as they watched Isabella chase butterflies in the yard. You were so scared and alone. I remember, Maria said. I thought I had nowhere to go and no one to help me. And, Now look at you. You have a home, a job, a future. Isabella is going to grow up as an American with all the opportunities that means. Maria nodded, watching her daughter's joyful exploration of the world around her. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Tom hadn't been at that warehouse that day, but he was, Rita said simply. And that's all that matters. As the sun set over the Mackenzie Ranch, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in America with nothing but hope and desperation. Now she had something she had never expected to find, a place where she belonged. People who valued her, and the freedom to build the life she wanted for herself and her daughter. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when she thought about giving up. But with the help of good people who saw her as a human being deserving of dignity and respect, she had not just survived, she had thrived. And as Isabella took her first steps across the porch into Maria's waiting arms, Maria knew that this was just the beginning of their American story.